Penguin Random House Audio presents The Rejection That Changed My Life. 25-plus powerful women on being let down, turning it around, and burning it up at work by Jessica Bacal. Read for you by Jessica Bacal, Frankie Corzo, Catherine Ho, Adenrele Ojo, Brittany Pressley, Maggie-Meg Reed, and Olivia Mackenzie-Smith.
For my parents. Introduction. What made me think people would be willing to tell me about their rejections? Yes, I'd edited an earlier book, Mistakes I Made at Work, in which I'd asked women to talk about work mistakes, but that seemed somehow less threatening than asking about rejections. At Smith College, where I direct the Narratives project, my ambitious students heard a lot of gratifying yeses about fellowships, internships, and jobs, but also some disappointing no's. They trashed or deleted these rejections. They never seemed too interested in publishing them. Maybe I was setting myself up for failure. One potential interviewee, a successful businesswoman, balked. Does rejection have to be in the title? A friend in the media emailed that certainly she had learned from her rejections, but wasn't comfortable sharing. I'm sorry, she added. Many of my invitations to participate in this book went unanswered. A professor I deeply respect emailed saying she didn't want her story in the book. Honestly, she wrote, I'm not sure what the point is. The point is this. Hearing stories like these makes people feel they aren't alone. I'd heard from readers that they'd reached for mistakes I made at work after tough work days, and it had comforted them. We live with the myth that our careers should be linear, that messing up is like landing on the wrong spot in Chutes and Ladders, one god-awful day and we'll be sent plunging downward. In reality, our career paths can zigzag and bump along. It doesn't mean we've gone down a chute. Still, a rejection can feel like that. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I personally had often tried hard to avoid rejection. During my senior year of high school, I applied early to college, ostensibly because I liked the school, but also because it meant that if I got in, I could take back all my other applications. I was accepted and went to Carleton in Minnesota. It's a wonderful place, but applying early decision meant I never had to learn whether I would be accepted or rejected at the other schools. Even within the last 10 years, I applied to 2 doctoral programs and was somewhat shocked and embarrassed to be rejected by both. I'd overreached, I thought. I wasn't as smart as I'd imagined. My first choice had been the University of Pennsylvania, but I convinced myself that it would have been a terrible idea anyway, since it meant I'd have to leave my family every month. Then one day over lunch, my friend Julia at Smith said, "People get rejected from these programs all the time, just reapply." I realized that if I were talking to a student, that was the advice I would give. Don't take a first rejection as an absolute. Why couldn't I give that advice to myself? I decided to try again and was thrilled when I was admitted. The time away from my family was hard, but I earned my doctorate. Curiously, I never avoided romantic rejection. I had no problem asking people on dates. At age 28, I pursued my now husband with a mixtape that featured my favorite Bruce Springsteen songs. It was school and work that somehow made me feel vulnerable. I didn't want to hear that I wasn't good enough. Rejection would confirm something I already knew about myself, that I actually wasn't smart enough or accomplished enough and didn't belong in those spaces anyway. Rejection can reinforce a message that many of us are receiving all the time in small ways. You don't belong. Reina Brands and Isabel Fernandez Mateo, researchers at London Business School, have shown that female executives are less likely than their male peers to reapply for jobs in leadership after being turned down. It's not because women are less resilient or persistent, but because they have already experienced years of small rejections in work cultures that generally value maleness more. They have felt a lack of belonging that leads them to believe it would be foolish to reapply. For women of color, rejection at work is compounded by racism. Highly qualified women of color are less likely than white women to get credit for their accomplishments. A major report from McKinsey and LeanIn.org showed that women of color get less support than white and male peers do from their supervisors. And let's face it, a big part of why I avoided rejection for so long is because it sucks. It just feels bad. But in this case, with this book, it was more personal than ever. I had just experienced a major rejection. More on that later. And it made me think that it was time to get some support and gather a book-length collection of virtual mentors. I wanted them for myself, for my undergraduates at Smith College, and for readers and listeners. I imagined I would find professionals from diverse backgrounds who could remind us of how common rejection is and how it truly isn't the end of the world. Sometimes it's the beginning. I knew from my work as director of the Narratives Project that sharing personal stories was powerful and even transformative. And I'd seen after publishing my first book, Mistakes I Made at Work, that it was useful to normalize the uncomfortable and crappy parts of work, to hear, "This happened to me, it sucked. You'll get through it." That book included only interviews with women. This one does too, even though I think about gender differently than I did in 2014 when Mistakes was published. I understand now that the categories of male and female feel way too restrictive for many people. And social science overwhelmingly shows that men and women aren't that different. In fact, we are basically alike in terms of personality, cognitive ability, and leadership, according to the American Psychological Association. But there was something about pairing rejection and women that I found especially intriguing. We live in a culture where masculine shouts strength and independence, while feminine whispers softness and collaboration. It puts both sexes in a bind, but at work, it hurts women more. Women are not supposed to be self-promoting or too assertive or angry. We're supposed to look for the point of connection, for approval. So I wanted to hear about what happened to women when they hadn't gotten it, when they'd been outright rejected. Plus, when I thought of my own experiences of rejection, it was other women's stories that had helped me. I was inspired by women I knew, like Dr. Elizabeth Bell, interviewed in this book, who was rejected from medical school when she first applied. I was awed by my friend Heather Abel, who dealt with a lot of rejection before her beautiful novel was published to glowing reviews. I was inspired by the women who participated in my last book, like Judith Warner, who lost a journalism job she loved, found meaning in writing about mental health, and was deeply gratified by the people who said her work helped them. These were the kinds of stories that I wanted to hear. I wanted them because of my own recent and very memorable experience with a work rejection. Even when you are generally a rejection avoider, sometimes you are drawn to making yourself vulnerable. In 2019, I was working at Smith and loved my job, but I applied for a different job at the college. This meant writing a kick-ass 3-page cover letter with my vision for a new center, giving a presentation which I practiced for hours in front of friends, and asking colleagues for letters of reference. It meant being interviewed by people who already knew me. After years of informal, friendly interactions, we now sat formally and somewhat awkwardly around a conference table so they could assess my potential. After the application process was over, I checked my email obsessively. I privately observed and interpreted the facial expressions of colleagues. When we passed each other on the street, did that friendly smile reveal a sense of confidence in my abilities, or was it sympathy? The head of the hiring committee was actually my supervisor, a woman who was brilliant, elegant, and kind. Several weeks after I applied, she called me into her office and closed the door. When she told me, "We've offered the job to someone else," I made an effort to sit in an open-armed, relaxed way. I'm not upset, but with good posture. I still feel good about myself. She was clearly worried about my feelings, and I didn't want to make the conversation harder. I also hated the idea of her wondering if I might cry. "Okay," I said. "I told the team," said my supervisor, "and they were all worried, asking if you'd be okay. I told them you would." "I am," I said. "I really am fine." "They think I'm pathetic." I wondered who had.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?